Let's get into something that nobody talks about enough. You made a mistake recently. Maybe it was in a meeting or in a message you sent or mid sentence in a conversation, and something happened inside you. Your face got hot, your thoughts scattered. You wanted to disappear, or at least to rewind the last 10 seconds. And the worst part, you knew exactly what you did wrong, which somehow makes it worse. I want to talk about why that happens because if you've been learning English for a while now, if you're intermediate, advanced, if people around you would probably describe you as good at English, and you're still experiencing that feeling, I want you to know something first. That feeling is not a sign that you're failing. It's not a sign that you're behind. It is actually a sign that something very specific is happening in your brain. And once you understand what it is, your relationship with making mistakes will start to change. So let's go there. But first, if you're new here, hello, hello. My name is Jean. I'm an English teacher. I've been teaching since 2019, and you're listening to English Extras, a podcast designed to make English make more sense. If you want to improve your English, make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. It's also a great way to support me and my work completely for free. When you make a language mistake in front of other people, it doesn't feel like a technical error. It doesn't feel like pressing the wrong button on a keyboard. It feels like exposure, like something true about you just got revealed, like the gap between who you are on the inside, articulate, intelligent, nuanced, and who you appear to be in that moment has just become visible to everyone in the room. And language is the reason that gap hurts so much because language isn't just a tool. It's how you signal everything about yourself, your intelligence, your warmth, your sense of humor, your authority, your precision. When your vocabulary fails you, your wit fails too. When grammar breaks down, nuance breaks down. When you can't find the word, your personality, the full version of it, doesn't come through. That's not a small thing. That's actually a profound experience of self loss, even if it only lasts 20 seconds. Now, here's where it gets interesting because what you're feeling is not irrational, even though it might seem that way. Your brain is wired, deeply evolutionarily wired to detect social threat. And for most of human history, social rejection wasn't just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. Being cast out from a group could mean death. So the brain developed a very sensitive early warning system for anything that might signal rejection, anything that might lower your status in the eyes of others. And here's the thing, your amygdala, the part of your brain that processes threat, does not distinguish between physical danger and social danger. It responds to both the same way. Increased heart rate, heightened skin response, cognitive narrowing, which is that feeling where your thoughts suddenly get smaller and harder to access. So when you forget a preposition in front of your colleagues, your brain is not overreacting. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do. It's treating a potential status threat as a threat worth responding to, which means that telling yourself, just calm down, it's only grammar, does almost nothing. You can't logic your way out of a physiological response. The embarrassment doesn't go away because you decide it's irrational. It goes away, or really, it becomes more manageable through a different process entirely. And we're going to get to that. But first, I want to tell you something about mistakes that might genuinely surprise you. Your brain cannot update without mistakes. I mean that literally, not as encouragement. I'm not a scientist, but experts say that this is how learning works at a neurological level. Your brain is constantly making predictions. When you speak, it predicts the outcome. Did the grammar feel right? Did the word land? Did the listener understand? When the output doesn't match the intention, or when feedback signals that something went wrong, the brain registers what's called a prediction error. And that prediction error is the trigger for an update. No mismatch, no update. When you speak and everything goes smoothly, nothing reorganizes. When you make a mistake and register it, or when someone gives you feedback, the internal model shifts. The neural pathways adjust. Something gets restructured. This is why the learners who avoid mistakes the most carefully are often the ones who plateau. Their accuracy looks stable, but their level doesn't rise because nothing is triggering the restructuring process. They're protecting themselves to the point of stagnation. This is where the frustration starts. If you've been stuck at the same level for a while, if your English feels like it's not moving, if you can function but not fully express yourself, it's worth asking, have you been avoiding the situations where you might fail? Have you been sticking to safe conversations, familiar topics, contexts where you know you can perform well? Because that instinct makes complete sense. Of course, you avoid the thing that feels like a threat. Of course, you navigate around situations that might expose the gap. But that detour is also the thing keeping the gap open. Children learn language without this problem, not because their brains are better at acquiring language. That's a whole other topic. But because their identity is still flexible. A child who makes a mistake doesn't experience it as a threat because the self isn't fully formed yet. There's no firm version of who I am to protect. Adults are different. By the time you're in your 20s, your sense of self is built. You know who you are. You have a history of success in certain areas. You have a reputation among your family, friends, and colleagues. And when the language comes out wrong, all of that feels momentarily at risk. The emotions you experience when you make a mistake isn't really about your level. It's about the inconsistency between your self view and your output. You know you're intelligent. You're probably very articulate in your native language, but then you open your mouth in English and what comes out doesn't show that. The intelligent, nuanced person you are doesn't arrive. A simpler, slower, more uncertain version does instead. The pain comes from that uncertain identity. And knowing that doesn't immediately fix it, unfortunately. Awareness is only step one, but it does change the question. Because if the problem is an uncertain identity rather than actual incompetence, then the goal isn't to become perfect. The goal is to become stable and imperfect at the same time. That's a different target, and it's one you can actually train. So, what does that actually look like? The first shift is this: stop measuring how often you make mistakes. Start measuring how quickly you recover from them. Think about native speakers of any language. They look confident and authoritative, but watch them closely and you'll notice they restart sentences. They say, "What I mean is," and "let me put that differently," and "actually, no." They are constantly repairing. The thing that makes them different isn't a lack of error, it's the calm they move through error with. They don't make a mistake and then collapse. They make a mistake, register it, correct themselves, and continue. The thread of the conversation continues. That composure, that ability to remain stable is a skill. It's not a personality trait that some people have and others don't. It's something that gets trained. And the only way to train it is to keep putting yourself in situations where you might fail and then practice not collapsing when you do. The second shift is to pre-commit to error before you enter a situation. To pre-commit, by the way, means to firmly decide to do something before you do it. If you'd like to learn more about the words and expressions I'm using in this episode, the transcript has definitions and example sentences, and you can download it completely for free. Link in the description. So, before a meeting, before a conversation, before a class, I want you to tell yourself, I will probably make a mistake today. That is the plan. And when I do, I'm going to watch how quickly I can recover. Recovery matters most, not the mistake, but how fast you came back. The third shift is to learn repair language. Phrases like, "What I meant to say was," or "let me rephrase that," or "actually, I think the better word is," etc. These aren't signs of weakness. To a native speaker, they're completely normal because native speakers also do this in conversation. Learning to use phrases like this smoothly is part of becoming fluent. If you're still skeptical, let me tell you what I do as a teacher and how I look at your mistakes when I'm sitting across from you or listening to you speak. If we're in class together talking and you make a mistake, here is what I notice first. The mistake itself, yes, but almost immediately after that, I'm noticing something else. I'm noticing what the mistake tells me about where you are developmentally. And that information is useful to me. It's not a judgment, it's data. Let me be specific. There are different kinds of mistakes, and as a teacher, I treat them very differently in my head. Some mistakes are what I'd call slips, which basically means that I know you know the rule, but you were moving fast and the wrong form came out. These I don't worry about. I don't correct these unless they become a pattern, because correcting a slip mid conversation usually just disrupts your flow and makes you more self conscious without actually teaching you anything. Some mistakes are what I think of as developmental errors, meaning structures that you're in the process of acquiring. You're using them, which means the acquisition process has started. The form isn't stable yet, but you're working with the right material. These I notice. I might correct them immediately, but it depends because correcting in the moment would interrupt the communication. And if I still understand you, I don't want to interrupt your flow. Then some mistakes actually break communication. The meaning doesn't land, and I genuinely don't understand. These I address directly and immediately because the communication has to function. But even then, I'm correcting the structure, not you. I want you to take away this. When you speak in front of me and make a mistake, and I don't immediately stop you to correct it, that is not me being polite. That is not me pretending I didn't notice. It's me making a deliberate decision that your flow in that moment is more valuable than the correction. And if you made no mistakes in a session with me, I would be concerned. It tells me you are either too advanced to get much help from my classes, or it tells me you are not taking enough risk. I would wonder whether you were staying inside a safe zone that felt comfortable, which means you weren't expanding. A perfect session is often a wasted session. I know that goes against everything you were taught in school. In school, mistakes were marked, counted, and returned to you as evidence of what you got wrong. And honestly, that system does real damage to a lot of learners. It trained people to experience error as a moral failure rather than developmental data. And many of you are still carrying that. But I'm telling you, what I actually see when you speak. I see someone whose brain is doing exactly what it needs to do. Someone who is in the middle of a reorganization process that is difficult, slow, and worth it. The mistakes are not the problem. They are the proof that the process is working. So let's come back to the feeling because understanding all of this doesn't make the hot face go away. It doesn't stop the cognitive narrowing mid sentence. Like I said, awareness is only step one. Here's what I want you to try. When you feel that embarrassment, instead of seeing it as I failed, try seeing it as my brain just revised something. The discomfort is the sensation of updating. It means the prediction error was registered and the restructuring process has been activated. That's not a comfortable feeling, but it is a productive one. And over time, something changes when you hold that view consistently. The emotional response doesn't disappear, but it stops meaning so much. It stops being the thing that determines whether the conversation was a success or a failure. It becomes background information. The goal is not to feel nothing. The goal is to feel it and keep going anyway. That's the advanced skill. And paradoxically, it's not a language skill at all, but developing it will improve your English more than almost anything else. The learners who get stuck aren't usually the ones who can't understand grammar. They aren't the ones who don't have enough vocabulary. Learners who get stuck are the ones who can't tolerate imperfection long enough. They stop too early. They retreat to safe ground. They protect the plateau. And the learners who break through, the ones who get to genuine fluency to the point where language stops feeling like something they're doing and starts feeling like something they simply have, those learners share one characteristic more than any other. They have learned to stay in difficult conversations and to remain present when they're not performing well. What's being built here is not just English, it's the capacity to remain stable and imperfect at the same time. So if you're frustrated right now, if the progress feels slow, if the gap still feels too wide, if you're wondering whether you'll ever sound like the person you actually are, I'd ask you this. Are you protecting yourself from the thing that would actually move you forward? Because the path through is not around the mistakes, it's through them. Let me know what you think about making mistakes in the comments and if this episode today gave you something new to think about. As always, thanks for listening, my friends. Until next time, bye.